Welcome, everyone. On this edition of Best of Both Worlds, it's my pleasure to get to talk to two college students who will be voting for president for the very first time. Both of them are passionate about their candidates and the election, and it is very much a pleasure to chat to them both. I'll start with you. Jasmine Powell is at Brown University. Hi, Jasmine.
Hi, how are you?
And now I'll go to Avita Duffy, who is at the University of Chicago. Avita, hi to you.
Hi, great to be here.
So Avita, there is huge interest here in Australia. People are following the US election closely. I'd love to know, who are you voting for and why are you supporting the candidate you're supporting?
Well, I'm voting for Trump. I've been, since I was registered to vote, I've been a Republican, and I think that Trump is really standing up for the United States, standing up for specifically workers from my state. And I think that he really has the best interests of myself and my fellow Americans in mind.
Just quickly before I go to you, Jasmine, Avita, you mentioned your state. That's the state of Wisconsin. That's a swing state. Does that make it extra interesting this year?
Yeah, Wisconsin is a really interesting state. We've had a lot happen, not just this year in regards to George Floyd riots in Kenosha, but we've also been a state that has gone in 2008 to Obama, and then in 2016 to Trump. So we've really gone both ways. It's a very interesting state.
Speaking of interesting states, Jasmine, you're also from a fascinating state, from the state of Pennsylvania. What are things looking like there, Jasmine?
Yeah, things are very interesting in Pennsylvania, similar to what Avita was saying. In 2016, Trump won, but the previous two elections, Obama won. So definitely going back and forth. And I think it's especially interesting because Vice President Biden is actually from Scranton, Pennsylvania. So it's kind of his home state in a lot of ways. So yeah, things are very interesting in Pennsylvania too. I personally will be supporting Joe Biden for president, just because of his really care for American people and care to bring the country back together. I think this year's divided us in a lot of ways, and also just been a difficult year, obviously because of the COVID pandemic, but then also because of all of the instances of racism, which have been publicized a lot on the news this year. So I think it's just been a lot for Americans, and I think that Joe Biden is the person to bring us together and show us the path forward.
What to you are the most important issues in this election?
Healthcare is definitely at the top of my list. Right now, we are, like I said, in the middle of a pandemic, and I think that universal healthcare coverage is very important. Vice President Biden has long supported this. While he was Obama's vice president, they passed the Affordable Care Act, but the Trump administration has been trying to repeal this, but not really try to replace it. So I think for me, healthcare is definitely very important in this election because of the pandemic. But then beyond that, also the environment and environmental policy is very important to me too, just because that also is our future, and the planet is very important to all of our lives.
Let me go back to you now, Avita, if I can. In terms of the pandemic and healthcare, what are your feelings about how President Trump, as the incumbent, has handled that issue?
Well, when it comes to the coronavirus, I think that we've seen this question play out in the debate stage for every single debate that we've had, and Trump, he had a response in the beginning to shut down travel outside of the country. He understood that it was an important threat to the United States and our health and our safety. But he also didn't want to panic, and he didn't want the American people to have a panic attack over the coronavirus. And so I think that that's kind of the two different sides of who's offering what. And in the debate, Trump said, "I don't want it to. You should let it control your life, and we should make sure that people are safe, but also that they're able to go to work and that we can keep the economy running." Whereas Biden kind of has been saying, okay, we need to fear the coronavirus, and Trump says, "Don't fear it. Take it head on. Be cautious, but make sure that we're still functioning as a society."
Being a young person who's politically active, as both of you are, what's it like to be somebody on campus? I know, Jasmine, that you're the head of the College Democrats at Brown University. Is there a lot of interest among young people in voting this year, Jasmine?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is. Brown's campus is very interesting. I think everyone is just kind of civically engaged naturally, but especially around this election, we have gained a lot of members. We've held some lively phone banks where people are, calling for a lot of candidates that they want to support, and also just like doing the background research to learn more about the policies that are on the ballot. So yeah, it's been really great just to see the Brown community really rallying around this election. And actually, our university made Election Day a holiday to make voting more accessible. So I definitely think that even beyond just the student body, just at our institution, I think this election is very central to everyone's minds.
And what about for you, Avita? What has it been like at the University of Chicago? These, we should mention for our Australian viewers, these are both really powerhouse universities. What's it been like at the University of Chicago in terms of the kind of political feeling of this election year?
To echo what Jasmine said, the Get Out and Vote initiative at the University of Chicago is very robust. The university administration is really pushing students to go out and vote, as our student organizations and even our professors are constantly reminding us to make sure that we have our voices heard in the democratic process. That said, when you ask about feeling, I'm a conservative, but I go to a very leftist liberal college, and so it's definitely a get out and vote, but mostly a get out and vote for Biden movement that you see on campus, at least for me, and where I'm at. So although I disagree, it's a lot of excitement for one side.
Well, and to that point, I know that you faced some real pushback from a social media sense when you posted something about your support for Trump and in particular related to the pandemic. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So the University of Chicago has a branch called the Institute of Politics that's run by David Axelrod, who's the former chief advisor of President Obama. And it's a nonpartisan group that basically, tries to, make students have conversations and talk about politics together. And I was a part of a Get Out and Vote initiative from the University of Chicago, IOP, the Institute of Politics, where I wrote why I voted, and it was on a whiteboard. And so everybody wrote on a whiteboard, I vote because, and then you would say why you voted. And some examples were, I vote because kids don't belong in cages, or I vote because everyone deserves, or everyone has the right to health care. And I wrote, I vote because the coronavirus won't destroy America, but socialism will. And this was posted from the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics social media. So I actually didn't even post it. And I received very intense backlash. People didn't attack my science so much as they attacked my character and my family, my intellect, even my physical appearance. It ended up with me even receiving a death threat from one of my fellow students. And so then I was compelled to write an op-ed reminding the student, population of civility, even though most people don't agree with what I wrote. The reaction was not appropriate and certainly not becoming of the University of Chicago, which prides itself on being a university that stands for free speech and has really advertised itself as that.
Let me ask you, Jasmine, is it getting tense there at Brown or not as much?
Yeah, I definitely think it's getting tense in some ways, but a little bit different than what Avita was just mentioning. I think at Brown, the tension is almost within the Democratic Party, so within the spectrum. So people who align more with the Democratic Party would consider themselves liberal, but aren't fully in support of Biden, who's more moderate in terms of our party's stances. So I think at Brown, there's like a little bit of tension, but like on the other side, which is interesting to watch play out. I think the overwhelming majority of the student body does kind of agree with who they want to vote for. But there definitely is a small minority of people who will actually be supporting Trump also on our campus. And we actually debated the Brown Republicans the other week. So got to, see some of that play out too, which was interesting.
Do you feel like the party is coming together and that there's going to be a surge of voting for Biden? Or do you think some people are going to stay home because the reality is that this is too much of a centrist candidate for them and they don't feel like their voices were heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly the party will come together. I think we've already witnessed that a lot. And I think even on Brown's campus, I've witnessed that a lot. I know a lot of people on our campus were big supporters of Senator Sanders in the primary. And I've talked to a lot of them and they're going to be voting for Joe Biden. So I think if that's any indicator, of America in general, I do think we will get behind Biden. And I don't think people are going to be sitting this election out if they can help it.
Does that ring true to you, Avita? Do you feel like people that you know are going to get out, they're going to vote, they're going to take their passion to the polls?
I actually have a little bit of personal experience in what Jasmine is talking about, because I'm not only a student, but I'm also a part-time journalist for The Federalist, which is a conservative publication. And I did some live reporting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, following the shooting of Jacob Blake, who was an unarmed Black man. Or sorry, he was armed with a knife, not armed with a gun. And so when I went to talk to demonstrators there, these were people who were, leftists. They were out, protesting police brutality. And when I asked them if they supported Biden, they said, actually, we're not so much pro Biden as we are anti-Trump. And a lot of them felt that they were really disappointed. They were Bernie supporters. These are activists in the Democratic Party who would travel to come to a protest, and I didn't see anyone talk to anyone who was excited about voting for Biden. And even some of them said, we might sit out the election. I don't even know if I'm going to vote. But they were vehemently anti-Trump, but not necessarily pro-Biden.
Speaking of what happened in Kenosha, it's impossible to talk about this election without talking about the racial reckoning that has happened in the aftermath of George Floyd and the protests that swept across the country. What are your thoughts about that, Avita, in terms of how you think that will affect the outcome in Wisconsin, a swing state where you're from, and across the country?
I believe that everybody has the right to demonstrate and to protest and to, I mean, that's your right. And as an American, unfortunately, a lot of the protests that we saw this summer, including what happened in Kenosha, started out peacefully and then devolved, especially at night. And when I talked to locals, they felt like the violence was really coming from outside of Kenosha. People, leftist organizations from Portland and elsewhere were coming into the city to protest and to cause mayhem and havoc and burn things, and it was a mess. And the real demonstrators were kind of lost in the fray because these other people were causing so much trouble. And so I think that unfortunately the takeaway from Kenosha for a lot of Wisconsinites was violence and rioting and destruction, and not necessarily a productive discussion. And so a lot of people, especially families and moms and dads who are worried about safety and security, were really disturbed by what happened in Kenosha. And I think it did a lot to harm the Democratic Party and to harm Biden in this election.
Jasmine, what's your take on that? The racial reckoning and all that has happened across the United States over the last few months. It's a big issue in the election. How do you think it is going to play out, and how do you think it's going to affect things in Pennsylvania, your home state, but also across the nation in this election?
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of take a different stance on it. I think, honestly, it's been really humbling just to see all the demonstrators and their continued support. And, the fact that people were willing to leave their houses in the midst of a pandemic while coronavirus was a very real possibility, just to say that enough was enough and they weren't okay with what was happening. So I think that, honestly, it's important to think about the fact that the vast majority of the protests have been peaceful. And if anything, I think this represents our country coming together and finally addressing injustices in our past and some of the sins this country was founded on. So I think specifically in Pennsylvania, I've witnessed that in terms of communities coming together. But I think it's also important to notice that all this stuff keeps happening. I mean, just yesterday, an unarmed man in Philadelphia was murdered by the police, and there's protests going on right now there. So I think that in the state of Pennsylvania, it's very close to home. And obviously we all watched this summer with George Floyd and Jacob Blake. But like I said, it's also happening right now in our backyard as voters are voting in Pennsylvania.
Well, and of course, there has been debate within the media in terms of what the candidates have said about who poses the greatest risk, whether this is right-wing protesters or Antifa. From your perspective, what's bubbling up in terms of what people are talking about there on the Brown University campus, and how do you think that'll affect the election?
Yeah, I think on Brown's campus, a lot of people are under the impression that it is more right-wing people, inciting some of this stuff. And I also think in general at Brown, most of the protests that we're witnessing in Providence, most of the protests that people attended this summer in their hometowns, like I said, were peaceful. So I just think in general, people aren't necessarily talking about the protests in a negative light. Like I said, I think the general consensus is that they are positive. And I think that a lot of people have been invited into the conversation around race and around fighting and activism and fighting for systemic change. So I think, yeah, if anything on Brown's campus, it's talked about in a very positive light. And I think that it's helped to, build a community too.
Evita, if I can go to you now, what are your thoughts heading into this in terms of, first of all, how do you think Wisconsin is going to go?
The polls have been constantly changing. I mean, it seemed like the gap was really big a couple months ago. And as we get closer and closer, it seems to be getting smaller and smaller. Biden is still ahead. But if we learned anything from 2016, the polls don't necessarily mean who's going to take the cakes. I went to a Trump rally recently in my, like, a couple 20 minutes away from where I live. And the energy was electrifying, and the excitement was really there. And so from what I see from people that I talk to, Democrats and Republicans that I have as family members, it seems like Trump is really is I think gonna pull through, just because I know a lot of people who didn't vote for him in 2016 and now are going to vote for him in 2020.
When you talk to the political experts about the states they're watching Wisconsin, they're watching Pennsylvania. Boy, are they watching Pennsylvania. There's even talk that it could all hinge on your state. What are your thoughts about which way it's going to go?
I honestly am feeling very optimistic. I feel like Joe Biden will win Pennsylvania, but like you said, it will be very close. Where I'm from is in Montgomery County, so just outside of Philadelphia. In our county, as well as the other suburban counties in Pennsylvania, will be very important because the margin that Biden can win those by will help him carry the state, because we do have some other parts of our state which normally will go red. So I definitely think that Pennsylvania will be very tight. I think the pandemic will weigh a lot on people. And I think that also just seeing what 4 years of Trump has brought will motivate people to vote differently. I think I know people personally who voted for Trump in Pennsylvania last time when he won the state, who now said they're going to be voting for Joe Biden because they're disappointed with what he's done and disappointed with what he's saying, along with some other Republican senators. So I think that Biden does have a very good chance of winning the state. But like you said, I definitely will be crossing my fingers and watching very quickly on election night, or honestly in the days after, because so much mail-in voting.
You obviously know a lot about politics. Can you tell us what it is that you're majoring in at the University of Chicago? And will we see you down the track as a journalist covering politicians, or potentially as a politician yourself?
So I'm a American history major and a creative writing minor. I'm doing part-time journalism right now, but I'm unsure of what I want to be and what I want to do after graduation. So that's still up in the air.
And how about you, Jasmine? What are you studying? And is politics part of your future, or will you be doing something else?
I am majoring in public health and urban studies, but I'm also actually on the pre-med track. So I'm looking at a career as a physician. But I'm really passionate about health policy and looking at the way policy informs social determinants, which then inform health. So I think for me, yeah, maybe I will do something in the politics arena, but if not, just as a physician, advocating for patients in the political space.
Well, thank you both so much, Jasmine Powell and Evita Duffy. We really appreciate your time. And as everyone knows, young people are getting out to vote in record numbers this year. And we can see that not only are you getting out to vote, but that you have a very strong command of the issues. So thank you both very, very much.